Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, August 23rd, 2025. Today is day 687 since October 7th of 2023. Updates from the last 24 hours on the ground in the Middle East, starting with Gaza, where the situation continues to be catastrophic. In the last 24 hours, 61 Palestinians have been killed, with an additional 300 at least wounded. These were injured who reached hospitals across the Gaza Strip in the last 24-hour period of time. A global hunger monitor has confirmed that famine has afflicted Gaza City and is predicted to spread to other population centers in the Gaza Strip in coming weeks. Experts have said that by the end of September, the number of people experiencing famine will grow to at least 641,000 people, roughly a third of that of the Gaza Strip. Churches for Middle East Peace attended a briefing yesterday about the conditions of famine, and I wanted to give you some updates on some of the things that we learned. The famine only looked at data through the 15th of August. Famine in the Gaza Governorate, which is in the north, is expected to spread to the south and Han Yunis in September. 54% of the population in the Gaza Strip are suffering from emergency hunger. That's in the Gaza Governorate in the north, 54% suffering from emergency hunger. Famine is expected, as I mentioned, to extend to a third of the population in coming weeks. That means that that part of the population would be at level 5, which is considered catastrophic. As I began today's update sharing that news, the thought is that by September, 641,000 people, or a third of the population of the Gaza Strip, will be at catastrophic levels of hunger. This is the first time famine has been officially declared in the Middle East region, and the criteria that needs to be met for those conditions for famine to be declared has been met. That means the highest state of food insecurity, where 20% of the households have no food, 30% of the children are malnourished, and there are roughly 2 adult deaths per 100,000 due to starvation. Those are the conditions in order for famine to be declared, and that officially happened this week. Some of the main drivers that are underlying these conditions include displacement, where 90% of the housing stock has been damaged or destroyed. The entire population of the Gaza Strip is confined to only about 14% of the geographic area. This severely limits access to water, access to resources, access to adequate housing. It limits access to the very few distribution points where aid is being distributed. The second factor is the Israeli restrictions on what's going on. The deliberate shutting down of aid, the mechanism that has controls in place so that aid cannot be adequately delivered. These are man-made restrictions, and this is why we're saying that this famine is man-made. The Israeli government continues to put restrictions on aid delivery, which is one of the primary contributing factors to starvation and famine in Gaza. Before the war, Gaza produced about 50% of their own food. Now it's less than 2% on land that's available for agricultural production. We read a statistic last week that said only 1.5% of the land in the Gaza Strip is able to be used for agriculture. This is more than just about food. It's also about water and sanitation. Even if people get food, they often can't prepare it because there's not fuel and there's no water. The fact that everything is contaminated, we're seeing a considerable uptick in antibiotic-resistant diseases. There's also common misperceptions about how data is collected. Famine protocols have been in place since 2018. They have not changed the rules like the Israeli media has been indicating. Israeli media has been reporting that the agency issuing the famine report has lowered their standards with which famine is measured, and that's fundamentally not true, particularly when it comes to the practice of measuring children's arm with measuring bands, MUAC. Data sources reviewed by the Data Famine Committee. The data comes from lots of different sources, not just from the health ministry in Gaza. So the idea that this is Hamas propaganda is just not true. In fact, the determination of famine is not made from photos and those types of reports, but from actual data. The fix to famine also is not just about the provision of food. This is really important because the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation does not provide assistance. It only provides food. And food will not solve the problem of famine. It's much more complex. Vital nutrients and other medical aids have to be given at hospitals by medical professionals and healthcare providers in order to treat famine. Without that, the human body is not physically able to heal. Other news from Gaza, in the past 24 hours, the Israeli Defense Forces lost a lieutenant. His name is Gerlich. He was killed in Han Yunis. There was an explosion that involved an Israeli army device, which I don't know if that means friendly fire, but he was killed in an operational accident, there you go, involving the detonation of an explosive. The Army's investigating the circumstances. It's really important to note that there is a significant number, tens of percentages of the Israeli soldiers who are killed because of incidents like this, not because of Hamas militants. There is, of course, fighting, and Hamas militants do remain active. In the occupied West Bank, protesters have demonstrated against the National Security Minister, Ben Gvir. They have blamed him for torpedoing a hostage deal. I'm sorry, this wasn't in the West Bank. This was just in Israel. But the IDF has continued to uproot trees in the West Bank in the village of Al-Mokhir. This is the second conservative day. There was a shooting attack near an Israeli settlement on Thursday, and the IDF has responded by uprooting trees in the occupied West Bank. In Israel proper, as I mentioned, there have been protests, also 42 hostages. This was a statement that came out from the hostage families saying 42 hostages entered Gaza alive and came out dead. They've been having protests across Israel throughout Saturday and into Saturday evening, calling for a hostage deal and an end to the war in Gaza. Laron Berman, who's the brother of kidnapped twins Gali and Ziv, spoke at a weekly rally at Hostage Square and accused Netanyahu of sacrificing his brothers and the hostages. In Hebrew, he said 42 hostages entered Gaza alive and came out dead. They could not be saved. I don't want to be the family member of the 43rd. Opposition leaders, particularly the member of the Knesset, Benny Gantz, urged Netanyahu, Lapid, and Lieberman to form a government in order to be able to secure a hostage deal. So he's the chair of the centrist Blue and White Party, opposition Knesset member Benny Gantz. He called Saturday evening to form a government that's tasked with securing the return of the hostages and drafting a bill for Haredi conscription within coming weeks. Gantz said that a coalition would announce a mutually agreed election date in spring 2026 and pass the necessary legislation to dissolve the Knesset. Protests for the release of hostages took place across Israel. This was ahead of what's going to be a national day of struggle that's scheduled for next week. Protesters called for the release of hostages and against the government that's headed by Netanyahu. These protests are expected to take place and to continue. This is ahead of the National Day of Struggle that was announced by the Hostages and Missing Families Forum on Tuesday. The hostage families also have said to President Trump that he's the only one that can make Bibi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, end the war. So they're calling on President Trump to take action, and thousands of Jews and Arabs have rallied specifically in Tel Aviv against the Gaza war and against the hunger there, calling for an end to the genocide. This is actually happening in Israel. Gathering in Habima Square, demonstrators had signs that said stop the genocide. They displayed photos of Palestinian children suffering from malnutrition, and they chanted from Gaza to Jenin, stop killing children. We won't die in service of the settlements. Moving on to Iran, Iran forces killed 6 militants who they said had links to Israel. This was reported by Iranian news. This was today on Saturday after armed rebels killed 5 police officers in the Rest of region, the official news agency IRNA reported. There's evidence that showed the group was linked to Israel and may have been trained by Israel's Mossad agency, the news reported, but there was no immediate Israeli reaction. Iran said that its foreign minister spoke by phone with his French, German, and British counterparts yesterday in attempts to avoid the reimposition of UN sanctions over the Tehran nuclear program. This is just days ahead of a deadline that was set by the Europeans. In Lebanon, a news outlet reported that an Israeli drone fell in Bint Jabil in South Lebanon and that an Israeli drone attack in South Lebanon near a shepherd who was grazing outside of Kfar Shuba. Just one update from the U.S. Yesterday, President Trump said that it was likely that some of the 20 hostages who are held in Gaza who were believed to be alive have already died, and that Israel has denied there is proof of that being the case. I wanted to close with an update from the Cardinal of the Latin Patriarchate, the Catholic Cardinal of Jerusalem, Patriarch Pizzaballa, who said that hearts can change even in the Holy Land. There was a day of fasting and prayer called by Pope Leo for August 22nd. The Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem highlighted the power of prayer to open people to trust and to seek to do good. He said this is possible even in the Holy Land, where finding common ground is nearly impossible. On Wednesday, the Pope had invited the faithful around the world to grant peace, to implore the Lord to bring peace and justice to all who suffer in armed conflicts. He was specifically speaking of Ukraine and of the Holy Land. Last week, Cardinal Pizzaballa said, it really does seem like our Holy Land, which preserves the highest revelation and the manifestation of God, is also the place of the highest manifestations of Satan's power. That was a direct quote from Cardinal Pizzaballa. We're grateful for the attention to the theme of peace, the Cardinal said, which the Pope has returned to very often, almost always. It's a delicate theme, one felt deeply by us. It is not a time that we've committed ourselves to days of prayer and fasting. They have not been done in the past as well. It's the only thing that at this moment we can do. Pray and fast, keep our attention directed towards God. It's the only thing that we can do right now that will change the hearts of men. Prayer is not a magic formula. Prayer, warned the Cardinal, should not be relied upon as if it will solve all of the problems. Prayer serves to change hearts. Adding an approach to prayer in such a way will end up creating only frustration. He explained instead that prayer serves to open hearts in a context of hatred and rejection of the other, and has occurred with war and the absence of peace. Instead, the heart must always remain open to trust, to desire to do good, to build good, said Cardinal Pizzaballa. This is the strength of prayer, especially in the Holy Land, where recognizing the other is almost impossible in this very moment. I'll share others of his thoughts tomorrow in Sunday's reflection, but that's the update from today on Saturday, the 23rd of August. May God go before us, and may he hear our desperate cries as we pray for peace and as we work toward that end. In the name of Christ, amen.